Yeah. Hey, everybody. I guess I know at least half of the people here. Um, for who doesn't know me, I'm Markus. I finished my PhD, I think, somewhere 3 years ago, so nearly exactly 3 years ago. My supervisor was Magnus, and yeah, and I'm a power systems guy. Currently, I'm the CTO of a newly founded startup that we named Versiro. Versiro stands for the Esperanto words for green shift, Verde Transiro. So very abstruse name. Yeah, so we founded a startup in 3 months ago this year, but it has been a longer journey that basically started during my PhD and also spent over the half of the PhD of my co-founder Simon, who was a PhD student of Stein Erik here. So we are kind of like a casting boy group from industrial economics and LCraft. Yeah, so why am I holding this presentation? First and foremost, because Ida asked me, and I think it's also it's a great it's a great opportunity because for me in especially in electrical engineering, you get contact with a lot of large companies and you see like that side during your PhD, but you don't really get contact to somebody who tried kind of like doing their own thing out of their PhD. So that's kind of like I have the presentation that I wish I would have listened to a few years ago before I started this whole innovation thing. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the first disclaimer. That's something that usually the people when people from startups talk that they don't give. So it's kind of like your mileage may vary. So that's often when you talk to other entrepreneurs, and I spent at least the last few months, but also like years, speaking to a lot of startup people that have succeeded and failed to various degrees. And usually there's no recipe for success, starting from getting funding to selling products. So usually it's kind of like everybody has like one side to the story, right? So whatever I tell you now might not apply to you at all right now. Yes. So is it no, no. Camera. Yeah, so this is us. This is Simon and me, and this is kind of like our mental support group. So we basically we started up in independently of each other. We had kind of like the same idea, and we've been matched by TTO. So TTO is the local technology transfer office. If you haven't heard of it, then they're doing a bad job because you should actually know of them. They should have a little bit of presence in the departments. So what you can do there is like you can, if you have patents or if you have ideas, they help you commercialize it. So at least no Salman here has a project running with them. So they can help you with everything when you say, okay, this could actually be a product, then they help you setting it up and help you with basically everything. And also, like Ida said, she has been part of the journey and was actually for me, I guess, the main factor also why I choose this route, because in the end I didn't know it was actually a prospective job route for me. I just thought I would end up with a large company or as a researcher like everybody. Yeah, so who are we? Who is Versiro? So we are a software as a service company. Like I said, we founded in March. And what we specifically do, or what our main mission is kind of like quantifying uncertainty and optimizing decisions. So we do a lot of everything. Um, I would call us an automatization and data science startup, but we currently we're operating mostly in the financial and trading space, and specifically for renewable energy producers, whereas our current partners are hydropower producers. Also, I'm specifically saying partners because we're not we're an early stage startup, right? So we don't have any sales contracts running now. That didn't come out as as that in the email, but that's also a process, right? You don't start with positive cash flow from the beginning, and that's why funding is really important. And funding can come in a lot of ways and with a lot of strings attached. And we were kind of blessed. We went through a lot of funding rounds, whereas the last one, the NRC verification project, has been, I guess, the one that kicked off the possibility for us to go full time on this venture. The other things were all innovation grants that gave us the chance to do some research and do some like due diligence on the markets and scout the potential and come to the idea of a product where we are now, find partners, and yeah, and so this whole thing has been a journey, and I'm only showing the fundings that we received, but also of course we applied for more funding that we didn't receive. And I think that's kind of like the first lesson on the way here. You start as a blank slate, right? Like you usually when you finish your PhD, you don't really have a name in the industry, so you're kind of like starting at zero, and you will have points where you don't succeed. And then I noticed that other people that also applied for similar fundings that have not received maybe one of them, they kind of like scrapped their idea and tried other things and went away from the startup and venture route. And this persistence, I think, and also that we had like two shoulders to cry on, right? So everybody else had a shoulder to cry on for the other, helped us also like go through this kind of process of trying to get more and more funding. Yeah, so what do we do, or how do we start out with the idea? So we saw a shift towards uncertainty in energy systems. So that was specifically renewable energy coming into the system, making systems less flexible, making systems more uncertain over time periods. And that results in volatile prices. I think everybody has an overview of current prices or current power system issues in general, in specifically Europe. And what we saw is like flexibility becomes more and more valuable. And you can also see in the not only in the bigger companies, but also in the startup space, like this specific focus towards this flexibility as a key strategic asset is becoming more and more important. In Norway, we are blessed with hydropower being very flexible, but that also reaches its limits, right? And also hydropower has potential to be improved. And specifically, that's what we are building in terms of a product. We are focusing on intraday markets. So the electricity market has different stages. You have very long-term contracts over months and years, options. You have a mechanical system that just balances Kirchhoff's law and say, okay, I have to supply as much as I demand. And then you have different markets that give you a little bit of leeway until you deliver. So you have the day-ahead market, the day before, and the intraday market, which is basically a continuous auction. And the difference is not only the time that you basically bid once on the previous day for the next day, but also that the bids here are coming continuously. But it's also a different mode. I will talk about it next slide. As you can see here, right, there's an excerpt of the trades coming in on the intraday market. So you can see we're working in millisecond space. So that is very fast. So when you had the day ahead market, which is still the bulk of the trades in the electricity markets, specifically also in the Nordic areas, then you mostly have like, or you have one state where you then have to make a decision. But here you have to adjust your decisions basically in real time continuously to get the best result. Yeah, and the markets are pushing towards intraday because, of course, uncertainty in, for example, wind power, solar power, or even customer demand is less if I'm closer to point of delivery. Yeah, and the big other difference is the merit order. So the merit order is now actually discussed a lot in media, and it's basically a normal demand and supply crossing, and everybody submits their bid. In Hosseин's course, you can learn about why it's optimal to just submit your marginal cost. You just submit basically your minimal cost level, and then suddenly you will, or after the market is cleared, you will either have zero profits or profit. You will never lose money basically on your bid by just submitting the lowest cost that you can submit. And that works by the merit order, right? You just have supply and demand being crossed and matched, and there's no imbalance, right? So if you're hydropower or wind or solar, you're basically here. And if you're lignite, then you're basically here, and you go up to like oil and other coals. So basically, like you have this merit order, and then you clear it off, and this is kind of like your profit margin. So that works well. This is the day ahead market. That only works if you can gather all the bits together. In the intraday market, however, you have a running auction. So you see a trade popping up, and you have to either accept or reject it, and that goes in real time. So this is a representative chart, but it's not actually the intraday market for electricity. It's actually Bitcoin because it's a funny chart. Yeah. So, but it works the same way, right? You see somebody posting an order, and then you can either say, okay, I accept it or not, or I post my own order. I say how much I want to have or not have, and then it's matched and it's becoming a trade. And yeah, so that's very dynamic. And again, you also have to be fast. You have to see, is this trade a good trade or not? Can I get more? And there's a lot of uncertainty in that, which we quantify and make money for producers. Yeah, the fundamental idea is, especially for very quantitative people here, it's not very fancy, right? So you have a simulator, you have a solution solver, and then you have an optimal policy that you apply for the next day or for the next period, and you adjust it. So that's actually very old of an idea, right? We do the same thing. There's papers out that is older than me, written by some of the people in the room. and they basically follow the same method, right? So you have like predict future scenarios, make optimal decisions on the future scenarios, and then do the same here now. And that's basically what most of us more quantitative people here also do.
Markus, so you have to be less than 20 years old for a startup and PhD.
No, I think I can show you some papers. But yeah, so what we do different is we ported this a little bit into more modern techniques. We at the end of my PhD, I dabbled more into machine learning. I was a time at SINTEF where I did much more machine learning and kind of like automatized statistical inference, and that's what we apply here. So I call it see, dream, and act. You can compare it, I would say, less with the optimization models, with the large-scale optimization models that we run here, than with really like robotics models. So a big example that I use is NVIDIA, the GPU producer, but also Tesla. What they're building is they're building simulators for electrical vehicles to train, and they are like randomized. So they generate cities randomly, and then they navigate the vehicle and kind of decide on policies for the vehicle. So that helps you, so you don't have to like drive into walls in the real world, but you can do it in a simulator. And we use kind of the same approach in a little bit more toned down manner. Yeah, so I can discuss tech a lot, or what I'm allowed to discuss, but that's not why I'm here today. Why I'm here is the question I had at the end of my PhD, what to do now. And the previous assumption for me was, yeah, kind of like you going from your bachelor's, master's, PhD, and then you're moving forward. And the two main possibilities in terms of like a career trajectory that for I think like most of my academic career were these two ones, that work in a large and renowned company, right? You hear a lot about Statkraft or Equinor, and work in academia. You hear a lot about SINTEF, for example, or State NTNU. And these were the two options. And with SINTEF, I think I chose something also in the middle. But what I found, or what for me the prospects of that were, was that in larger companies, being just like one little wheel in a larger machine, you don't really have a lot of impact on the things that are happening, and you don't really find, or I didn't see the self-fulfillment. I saw it more as like, okay, this is a stable job. This is like kind of like nice to do during your day and separate work and life. And on the other hand, in academia, even though I really enjoyed it and I enjoyed the technical work, I found it's just like it goes nowhere, right? You're just hunting for funding, so you can hunt for more funding that gives you more funding, and you're just in this spiral of publish or perish. And one good mental health there. There's actually a really good Facebook group. It's called Review, something about Review 2. It's really good because it's like a lot of international people complaining about the review process. It's really great. It gives us some great memes, but it's not really really stable life. For me, it was kind of like the choice between bore-out and burnout, and I wasn't really satisfied with it. Right, I enjoyed for a time, especially research, but I think like at one point you actually want to see what comes of the research, right? If you write a paper, especially we in electrical engineering, we are not cited so much as like other fields, and we're not so impactful as other fields. So you do a lot of cool things, but in the end, you're just doing them for doing them.
Markus, go back. Can I just say that you're right? But I'm not turned out that in 5 minutes I have to be back in my hamster wheel.
Yeah.
I'm meeting a course development.
But the hamster wheel gets nicer over time. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, so Magnus is showing a sample of that.
And what to do after the PhD? You show the picture. So what then? Well, you made a company, and I grew and stuff.
Okay. Probably the same time investment. So then like the startup process, right? Like now I'm trash talking this kind of like more conventional routes a little bit, but it's not all fun and games in the startup. So it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. And the bad things about the startup is I think that's kind of like the things everybody knows, right? That you have to do a lot of different things. You need to manage yourself, and that means like in every regards, right? You don't have HR that you can go to and talk about something. You need to do everything yourself. You need to get like if you need software, right? The day we got Teams running, that was great. The day we got our website up, it was fantastic for me. So you need to do everything yourself. If you don't do it, nobody does it. But that also means if you think something is not important, you can not do it. And especially the need to wear a lot of hats things. Simon actually told me he thinks it's a good thing, so that's also negotiable. You might like some parts of that. The ugly thing is that especially the number one thing is something that a lot of people, I guess, anticipate when joining a startup. It's all kind of like it's all seen as a short-term thing, right? You're just like swinging from tree to tree, and sometimes you miss and fall on the ground. And yeah, so that's kind of the thing. And especially when you're in a leadership position, then that also means if you hire somebody, right, you are more responsible for them. And you also, if you hire somebody on the premise, this is going to be in 20 years, we're going to be super big, right? You have to be also realistic, right? And these are also things, again, that come to number 3, where your private and your work life fuse together, right? You get a bit emotionally attached to what you do, more so than if you work in a large company. If you're aware of those things, and they are kind of obvious, but it's different when you live through them, I guess then it's okay to start this thing. But it's really, you have to be aware that that's all things that can happen. Yeah, and the good things, the main good thing is equity. So that, I guess, what gets you up in the morning is that actually what you work for, you own at least part of it, right? And not only you own it, but you also influence it, right? So we create a work culture, right? We're currently in the process of hiring somebody, we're hiring somebody that is a cultural fit to us, right? And that's really important because you can build what then kind of like branches out. You're laying the foundation for it. And yeah, you can, again, you do what you consider important, and you have to kind of like separate tasks, and you have to leave some tasks out, right? You don't go into meetings if they don't bring you anything, right? Like there's always a thing that you have behind everything that you do, and that's really great, and that helps you growing as a person. And yeah, it's really fun. the abundance of funding opportunities, I put a little star there because that has changed in the last few weeks a lot. There's still a lot of capital in venture waiting to be turned into startups, but it's drying out a little bit. You can see it currently. I'm talking to some people in Silicon Valley, and they are in complete chaos mode there. And yeah, you can. It might change a little bit, but in general, in Norway, we're also like very safe in this regard. So there's a lot of capital available for startups. So they're just waiting for ideas in the industry. And that's also why I'm kind of here, because I think that connection to academia is the most important in that regard, right? Money is just the thing that gets you to the next deadline, right? It doesn't get you stable. It doesn't turn you into a company. It doesn't turn things into a product. And also you can have an impact on the world, and the exponential career path is really cool because, you know, like if you go in the company and you kind of like move up the linear chain, right? A lot of companies, you kind of have these like steps that, okay, you need this in order to get into a higher position, then you need this and this, and it's very gradual. And here it can go exponential, but it can go in every direction, right? And that's the cool thing about startups. It's like currently I'm CTO, so I'm number 2 out of 2 people. It sounds better if I say the first part. So, but we'll see, like in a year how it turns. Maybe in a year I'm a colleague of yours, or yeah, we never know. And one thing that's kind of a revelation that came to me when I was doing science and startup at the same time. The really interesting thing is that some of the things that are in the startup scene, I wish we had more in science, and that's exactly these things. It's that actually people are more willing to throw money at you for things that probably won't work out, right? In science, when we write projects, we usually have to write, okay, these numbers of publications, we're aiming for these and these journals, we're gonna have this and this technology readiness level at the end. And now when it's about venture capital, it's mostly like, oh, they have a cool team and they are really excited and passionate about it, let's go. And that's really cool, because that's how you can create things and how you can create really crazy things, right? And you get a lot of crazy things funded, right? Every time you read about a startup that sounds really insane, you also have to think, that could be me, right? I could have a less insane idea that might work out, right? And that's the thing. So you always read about really weird things, and I think it's a good thing. That should come out of science, right? I heard a story once about a professor in cybernetics, like an old guy that tried to control fish. So I'm not sure if anybody heard of it. I guess some heard of it. So he tried to like control fish by giving like the leading fish in a school kind of like some equipment, and then like control the entire school of fish. So that's a crazy idea, you know, that you want to follow up in science. And I think startups should be more adapting to science, but where we are is kind of like the opposite, sadly. Yeah, and here's another thing, that's an invention is not a product. That's also something I have to learn. You can have a really good idea on paper and really efficient, but as long as you can't box it up and put it on premise at a customer, it won't work, right? It can solve every problem, but if nobody uses it, it's not a solution, right? And that's kind of like the way you usually do it is you find people in the industry that are potential users and you reiterate. And that's what we did. The way we started out was kind of like a different thing where we ended up at the end. So we made small little iterations towards what the customers wanted. And where we are now, we are like at least closer to a product. We're not finished up, but we're at least like we're waiting to make a sale, basically. And that's the thing. That's where you go basically from like writing papers to actually installing something. There's a lot of steps in between, and a lot of like old systems that you encounter and that you have to adapt to, and that you have to make changes in order to be implemented. And that's also different for different industries. So we're working B2B, but if you're working with end consumers, for example, that's all vastly different. There's a lot of sociology involved in it as well, right? Because people have different user behaviors, people have different ways they approach things, right? and you have to kind of like you have to make your product robust to it, right? It's quite interesting, and it's should be simple. I mean, that's the main point, right? And that's something in science often gets forgotten, that we should keep things simple, and we should rely on things that are proven to work. Yeah, so there's one thing. There's one very overused phrase. It's your network is your network. Um, it's really stupid, but I mean, it really encompasses it. It's not only, I wouldn't say it's not only for people outside of your company, but it's also inside of your company, right? Everything comes down to people in the end, because I have or should have a 40-hour work week. I probably have a bit more, but in my 40-hour work week, there's only so much I can do, right? Then I have to get people that help me, and I have to get people that understand the things that I don't understand. So you start talking to people, start talking to other people from other companies, you start talking to people perspective for your company. You build a team. All these things are really important in a startup where you're growing basically in heads. And as researchers, so this is actually from this Principia Mathematica, the proof that 1 + 1 is 2. So that's the proof. So as researchers, we are not necessarily trained in communication and presentation. And there's some people at NTNU that I always admired for being really good scientific communicators. I couldn't say that I necessarily am a good communicator of research topics, but at least it's something that you have to learn. And as always, if you have a weakness and you identify it, you have to improve on it. And that's the usual weakness with scientists. So it's kind of, I would say that in science, you have to have like the hurdle, the height of the hurdle for like social interactions is very low. The bar is very low, but the bar for technical knowledge is very high. But when you go in the industry, it's kind of like the opposite, right? And that's also something, especially I had to learn. Yeah. So the last big thing is like how to get started if you're interested in this. And I'm not specifically saying like, oh, found a startup. There's also other things, right? If you, for example, if you're looking for a patent, if you have a really good method that you want to develop into a product, or if you just want to join a startup, right? You don't have to start a startup yourself. You can make use of existing structures. There's people out there that are really good entrepreneurs, but really bad technically. Perfect fit if you're the opposite. So the little things that I would summarize it to get started. That's the main point, right? Kind of like, again, network, get involved in it, talk to people like Ida is like, how do you do this? Get to meetups, all those things, but there's also a few resources. So the mentors and discussion partners, that's really good. So we're talking to a lot of again, different people from industry, everybody from like the venture side to prior startup founders, people that have founded several startups, people that have failed or succeeded. It's all good. You can always learn from them because they always have one story to tell you. Sometimes it doesn't apply to you, but usually you can, like gradient descent between it. And that's really good. So find people to talk to, build a network. And the good thing that I learned in startups, it's also very different than science. So Magnus is not here anymore, but he had a very good article recently because during review, a paper of his and his PhD students got stolen by the reviewers and resubmitted to another journal, right? So that's kind of like you have to be really on the edge in research, especially if you do things that a lot of people internationally do. But in startups, you can be very open because usually people help out and usually people are not looking forward to, I mean, you should be a bit careful about your IP, but they're not looking to kind of like take over your startup and steal your ideas. That's something like larger companies might be more prone to that, to try that with smaller companies. But if you look at other startups and if you look at people that have went through the startup route, then you can be very secure actually. You can talk very openly. And that's also something that I learned, like you can be really open in the startup scene. And a lot of people like people look, for example, for people to vent to, right? we kind of like we currently having frequent meetups with one CEO from another machine learning startup, and he's like 5 years longer into this startup, and he just needs somebody to vent, like vent about the problems and the things going on, and I wish I would have known that. And that's really great because we just can listen and we can just learn from the things he wish he would have done, and it helps him as well, right? So it's really great, and you really find a lot of open people. And the good thing is, people are not only like they also have a personal incentive to do that, right? If one of you guys comes to me, talks about startups and gets on this path, and they become successful, I have a contact that is successful, right? That helps me, that grows my network, right? So it's always good. You're always open for people that have a lot of potential. Yeah. So that's the main takeaway, I would say. Join events, find somebody that has other skills, and do it earlier than later. I think that's the best thing. If you so I'm 32. If in 5 years, if I have 2 failed startups, it's better than just 5 years of company experience, right? So it's still, if you fail, you're still kind of like tumbling upwards, and that's really a nice thing, and I think a nice feeling that helps you get over this temporality of everything, that like your funding is not unlimited and your job doesn't take you to retirement. Yeah, and that's also try and run into the wall again and again and again until you find a weakness. Yeah. If for the people that don't have my contact, you can find it here. We also have a company LinkedIn. We also have a website where you can see vacancies. So if you're actually finishing your PhD soonly, then that's also a good idea to either follow us on LinkedIn or follow our website. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.